Have you ever felt challenged or limited by fearful thinking? Is your authentic self crying out to be heard? Welcome, action takers, to another episode of the IDKWTF I Was Doing podcast. I'm your friendly guide and co conspirator, David B., alongside my equally passionate co host, Teresa Marick. And with decades of experience navigating the ups and downs of entrepreneurship between us, we are here to help break down the barriers standing between you and your business dreams. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life that kind of shifted your perspective entirely? A moment that seemed insignificant at the beginning, but would eventually become the pivot point in your journey? This is exactly what happened to today's guest and new friend of the show, Rich Life. Rich is an innate wellness guide who both parents and professionals hire to break through their own limitations using metaphor, mindful movement, and inner wisdom. Recently, after going through some significant challenges, Rich discovered three principles that drastically altered the course of his life, and today he's going to reveal those principles to us. Together, we'll dive into the depths of these principles and provide you with the tools needed to apply them to your own life, just like Rich did. Plus, as a bonus, Rich will be conducting a live coaching session with our very own Teresa Marick, guiding her through a personal family struggle she's been dealing with. The practicality and effectiveness of these principles will be put to the test in real time. You see, here at the IDK WTF podcast, we are driven by one mission: to arm you with practical, relatable, and actionable insights that you can apply directly to your life and business. That's why we're dedicating ourselves to be your partners and teammates in this journey, providing you with the resources and guidance you need to navigate through this maze of entrepreneurship. So, if you're ready to turn your life's pages and start a fresh chapter, listen in to this full episode because we're about to drop some wisdom bombs that will forever change your perspective on life and success. Remember, your future begins with a single action. Take that action now and hit that follow button so that me, David B., and Teresa Marick can be there with you on your journey. So sit back, focus up. Let's go, action takers.
And there was stress and anxiety around it. And when I crashed, I was having this acid reflux that was keeping me up at night. I was pacing it at 2 a.m. There was so much fear, and I was so scared of what was going on, of spiraling. And very slowly, I moved towards wellness. I got help of psychiatric doctors, and I was on some medicines. And then in these last 6 months, I've slowly weaned myself off of the medicines. And I found this, it's a psycho-spiritual understanding. It's called the three principles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this Scottish welder. He had a 9th grade education, and he had this enlightenment experience. And then after that, he no longer worked in the factory. He was speaking and leading. And I really found who I am through this understand, because I took off the layers.
Well, let me ask a question around that, because I think that's really, really interesting, because you were a health and wellness coach.
Yeah.
And you were doing all of these routines to have a healthier, better life. But was it you were doing so many of the routines, you were focusing on the actual routines, which is what caused stress? Or what was it that caused that buildup of stress, even despite doing all of the things that we're told that we should do, have the morning and evening routine? Where did the stress come from?
Yeah, I think the stress came from me feeling like I had to control. That I felt like I would take these wonderful practices that I'll still do every once in a while, but I almost became addicted to them. I almost would experiment and say, oh, there's this one. Okay, this one kind of works right now. Okay, now that has to be the one that I always do every single morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be like the one that fixes the thing. And it becomes them. And it's like all those practices, because what you listed, is so many of those are amazing practices in and of themselves. But if you're utilizing them to fix something, or to, like you were saying about being happy, you're like, I thought doing all this would cause my happiness. It's not a remedy. It's supposed to be like a supplement, is how I think when I think of those things. You want to supplement and enhance your life versus fix something that maybe you perceive as broken. So your story is super, super powerful. I think absolutely, like, having that control over something. And when you talked about having that stress, I'm like, yeah, I definitely, I think a lot of people can relate to that need for control, when a lot of things the last few years have been very out of control.
Yeah.
And so then you mentioned that you found 3 principles.
Mm-hmm.
David and I both, like, we love self-help stuff. So
Yeah.
So what are the 3 principles?
The 3 principles are mind, consciousness, and thought. And mind doesn't mean intellectual mind. It's talking about that creative intelligence within us. It's like the deeper mind. And consciousness is this gift. It's so powerful. It makes real whatever thinking that we put in front of it. It's amazing. It's like this special effects department. Michael Neal kind of calls it the special effects department. But not only does it make it real visually and auditorily, it makes it real in touch, taste, and also feeling emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so how do you think those emotions are, like, all connected with, you've got your thoughts, you've got emotions, and I love this because it's something that we actually talk about. I have a preteen, 9-year-old, and a teenager. So, like, I'm in the middle of this. So yeah, I'd love to know how do you think that is all connected?
Yeah. So in the principles understanding, thought is this creative power. It's like Play-Doh. And thought creates the emotions. But this is the mistake that a lot of people make. And the mistake is that they think that the feeling is a confirmation of the external circumstances. They think that because I'm feeling horrible right now, that means that they're a jerk, or that they've hurt me, or this situation is too overwhelming and I can't do it. But really, it's only showing you what's happening in your thinking in the moment. And when you see it that way, it can become this guide for you, because now it's showing you where you're out of tune. It's saying these thoughts are hurting, and if you continue to think them, they're going to continue to hurt. It's trying to help you. It's trying to bring you back to your own wellness, but we mistake it.
Do you have any examples of ways to catch yourself and start being aware of your thoughts and how you're being reactive? Because I think it's really easy to say that and look at it like logically after,
Yeah.
but in the moment is when we need to be aware of what we're feeling and what we're thinking and how it's affecting us, right? And so I think that's the hardest thing for most people, is to switch in the moment as opposed to thinking about it after the moment.
Yeah.
Do you have any like exercises or anything that you do personally to switch that mindset?
There with the principles, there's typically not a specific technique.
Mhm.
There's typically, it's an in the moment, usually an intuitive process, and then it's also based off of understanding. So a lot of the times when our emotions come up, we try to take action about that. We try to push them away, or think different thoughts, or we're trying to manipulate them in some way. And once the emotions come through, once the thought has created the emotion, there's not really anything that you can do. What can really help is this idea that it will pass, that mind, that inner innate wellness will bring us back. And also to see where it's coming from, that it's coming from our thinking. And if you understand those 2 things, it's not scary.
Absolutely.
You can have emotions, and you can be in emotions and they don't mean as much as they used to.
Yeah, it's like you allow them to have as much weight as they have. And they can weigh 100 pounds or they can weigh 2 pounds. It's just how much weight you're giving them and learning to go, oh, okay, this will pass. Like it's an emotion. I'm having it. But I think that's what David was alluding to. Like in that moment, do you just have that thought of, okay, this will pass? Or is there something that you do to like, because for me, I know that in those moments, especially when I'm like angry or upset, and being reactive, the best thing I can do is remind myself to slow down. I know that's why some people will like count to 10 or, something like that. Is there something that you find helps you in that moment remind yourself of that?
I think that's really great wisdom and insight to slow down. That the emotion is telling you to slow down. And what that can look like would really depend on that in the moment innate well-being giving you what you need. And it might be to do something different. It might be to just continue and feel it and be with it. There's not really a go-to, because if there was this go-to 3-step formula, everybody would do it.
No, I agree. But because every situation is different. I just think for me, that's actually something for the last couple of years, I've been practicing a lot of slowing down. And in that moment, it's really not always the easiest to do because we're so like we've done whatever we've done in the past for however many years we've behaved this certain pattern. Oh, when I'm mad, like your body just does it. And it's this habit that you've created. So it's like, how do I slow that down? How do I change? Because sure, sometimes you're not going to. Sometimes in that moment, you're still going to be snappy or yell or do whatever action that was going to happen anyway. But like for me, especially as a mom personally, it's like I really want to slow that down for my kids when I'm frustrated with them. So, because they're kids, but being able to in real time take a deep breath or whatever. And like you said, there is no perfect formula, but I guess I was just curious if there was something you personally do, because it's definitely different. So
yeah, and the principles work a little bit differently. There's a book out there, the principles. It says techniques for the principles, and it's blank. There's 100 blank pages.
Okay.
So, we want that 3-step process. We want something that is known.
Well, let's take a really quick break, and I have a question for you. Then we'll come right back and keep going with this.
Cool.
Have you ever started something new that you were really excited about and invested time or money into, but after doing it for a while, you reach a point and you just feel like, I have no idea what the F I'm doing?
There's that bubbling up of frustration because you're not quite as good as you thought you'd be, or it's nowhere near as easy as you expected. Then suddenly, a wave of guilt comes at the same time, and you don't really want to or feel like you can express this to anyone.
Having a dream you want to accomplish can be very sad and isolating. It's lonely because visionaries tend to see the world the way that it could be, instead of settling for the way the world currently is, like most people do.
We believe this so deeply that we wrote a book with the exact 4 steps to help.
This guide is designed to take you out of that feeling of frustration and overwhelm and lead you into the calmness and clarity that you need to reach the life that you know in your heart you're destined to have.
If you've started a project or a goal but have stopped, gotten stuck, or are starting to feel burned out, this is 100% the book for you.
Go to IDKWTFpodcast.com today and download your digital copy with the coupon code ACTION to get it on us, because we want to join you and be your supportive friends and partners throughout your journey.
It's only free for a limited time if you use the code ACTION by going to our website, IDKWTFpodcast.com.
Check it out today and let's get unstuck together. Welcome back. And we have been learning all about Rich and how our brains and our emotions and our thoughts and a different way to look at how we react when we're in a situation. And so my question I have for you, Rich, is if I'm, in the moment with like one of my kids, my teenager, because he and I love to butt heads, and I'm trying to like slow everything down. How would you coach me through a situation like?
Yeah. So I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about it. What's happening? What's going on that's frustrating?
I think it's really like this. I constantly repeat myself, and I feel like I make simple requests, and I mean they're kids. They're my son's not always gonna do what I ask him to do when I ask him to do it, but then I get this big attitude coming back at me when I'm like, okay, you didn't do the thing you said you were gonna do, or you haven't done your chores. You have 18 reminders. We were super forgiving about it. Your chores aren't that extensive. Take the dog for a walk and take the trash out or whatever it is, right? But then I get this big attitude, and I just there's a point where I get really frustrated, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not that hard.
Yeah. So it sounds like he wants to just do his thing, and you're like, get in line, kind of like.
Well, yes and no. I mean, my kids have a lot of freedom too. So, they get to do a lot of things they like. They get to have their activities. It's just so when I'm like, hey, like, it's not unusual. On Mondays, these are your chores. It's pretty set so that they know what's expected.
Mm-hmm. And then it's frustrating when it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So what I would probably point to is where that frustration is actually coming from.
Okay.
And this is hard, especially in the moment, because sensor consciousness makes that thinking real with feeling. You're like, I'm sure your kids are wonderful, but parents know. I don't have kids myself, so I can see that I'm sure it feels that way, and you're like, oh my gosh. But that what if it didn't come from the situation, and it didn't come from their response? What if it was coming from the thoughts that you were creating? You're using this creative power of thinking against yourself, but also against other people, against your kids.
It's a very different way to think about it, for sure. Because I used an example with my son, but really it could be any situation or other person. So then in that moment, if I can remind myself, okay, what's this like underlying issue? Is that what I should be like thinking about?
We have this ability to take it so personally, and that actually comes from the cloudiness, the contaminated thinking that we're having. And that when we see it with more understanding, both of ourselves, of the principles of where it's come from, because those same principles that are operating in you are operating in him. And so he's having thinking too that is hurting him and you. He's probably getting frustrated, and he probably lashes out. And when you start to see, that means that they're hurting. That understanding gives so much grace.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from what you're saying is it creates a lot of space. Whereas when you're wound up, there's no space. Like when you're angry, when you're even when you're really excited about something, there's no space. But when you kind of allow space for all of, the possibilities, it changes the way that you show up in that moment.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. There's also an element too that those thoughts are popping into your head. You're not really controlling them. You're not like saying, I'm going to have a thought about how frustrating this situation is, about how he doesn't do his chores.
Right.
It's almost this automatic response. And we can have this inclination to go with that first thought because that feeling comes along with it. And what if you said that there could be some space there? And then the next thought, it might be the same thought of, oh, he's never going to be able to do this. And then, okay, what might the next thought be? Oh, maybe he's struggling with something around this. when you allow that space, there is more clarity. Then you can have a thought, and you're going to know that you have the right thought. There's going to be a couple of things that are going to tell you. And the first one is that it's going to be obvious. You'll be like, I should have thought of that before. And the second one is that it will feel maybe not like amazing, but it'll feel better. It won't feel horrible.
Yeah, it'll at least feel more neutral than.
Yeah.
No, everything you're saying, it's all coming together for me. So thank you very much, because I think there was just I wanted to understand your thought process, and I feel like I really do now, because it's absolutely, my husband is naturally really, really good at this, of being like really slowed down. He's super chill, he's super mellow, and I think, when I slow myself down, when I can slow it down, if we're having a disagreement or whatever, it's the weight I give it. So it's like, to circle back to, we were talking about like how much emphasis we put on that emotion in that moment. When you give it space, when you give it time, and you're like, oh, maybe if I just consider this thing that's obvious, then it's going to feel better than however it felt in that moment before. So yeah. It's like full circle for me. Thank you.
Yeah, what I like about it too is we're always looking for like that technique, like you mentioned. We always want the 1, 2, 3 step process, but that's not always the case. This is much more of a practice, and the more you practice it, the better you get at it over time. Instead of just the 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is going to fix it, because that almost never works. And then adding, like you started off with, adding more 1, 2, 3 techniques into your life, and feeling like, okay, I need this technique for this thing. It gets overwhelming and can lead to more stress over time.
Oh yeah.
Can you give us an example of kind of how these principles have played out in your life?
What I've noticed most is in my relationship with other people, and especially my relationship with my wife, where I realized, and that's the cool thing about this, when you start to see where the thought comes from, you'll start to have a thought that can really change everything. A realization, an insight. I didn't know it at the time, but that's why I named my business Rich Life Realization. One thought can change almost anything. And I've had them multiple times in the last couple of months. One of them was, I was so insecure in my relationship with my wife. I was so afraid of being rejected by her that I pushed her away. And really, I realized I was beating myself up, and she kept saying, I need you to meet me halfway. And I said, I am meeting you more than halfway, but I wasn't. I was going that halfway, and then I was pushing myself back. I was in my own way, using the creative power of my own thinking to hurt myself.
Yeah, I think that is something very relatable that a lot of people do. So we trick ourselves into thinking we're doing what it is that we should be doing, and we know the thing that there is to do, but then somehow we self-sabotage and like backtrack from getting all the way to that point of what we're doing or what we should be doing. So what is it that you did to meet her halfway and to stop that self-sabotaging behavior?
I had that thought, and then there was a little bit of time after that where I would get back into that pattern, and there are times even now that I'll get back into that pattern. But now I can use my feelings as a guide. Now I can see if I am going into that space because it feels off, and I can know I like, oh, okay, I'm going back into that spot. I need to slow down. I need to question my thinking and allow space. And then a new thought will come, and then I'm going to see more clearly. Now I know that it's contaminated if it feels bad.
Yeah. So it's really just about, like, in a nutshell, of course, about noticing those feelings that are giving you the icky feeling, giving you that this is bad, this is heavy, this is negative, does not feel good.
Yeah.
And using those feelings and emotions to like remind yourself to go, oh, okay, this is my brain trying to guide me to a different space because I'm not meant to feel this way. Is that okay? Cool.
Because then you're not pushing your emotions away, then they become your friends. Even the most challenging and painful emotions are helping you. They're helping to guide you back to your innate wellness. And that's one of the cool things is as long as you're not using the creative power of your thought to push yourself back or hold yourself back, you naturally will be able to spring forward in time. That's why people, when after they have a good nap or they go to sleep and then they wake up and like, oh, I'm feeling better. Oh, that's your natural resiliency kicking in. But the creative power of thought is neutral. So it doesn't care if you're using it against yourself. It's like this mental self-harm that we can do. We're allowed to do because it's neutral. You can use it however you like, which is, it's both amazing and it can be challenging.
Absolutely. So you started your podcast not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that. It looks like you do a lot of interviews as well, which is always fun.
Yeah.
What's probably your most favorite interview that you've done so far?
I really had a wonderful conversation with another coach. His name is Coach Daniel Magnuson recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a phenomenal discussion where, I think you'll like this piece. He had this insight that I picked out that was one of my favorites, that the present moment is like this light. And I think this actually really applies to your guys's podcast and taking action, those action takers who are listening in, because he has this metaphor of that we're surrounded by fog and that we do have a light, we have a candle, and we can see the next step in front of us using the power of this candle, the power of this present moment. And a lot of people think that, oh, I can't do that because it's way out there, it's in the fog, it's unknown, it's scary, and they never take that first step because of it. But you don't need to have it all revealed to you. In fact, you can't. That all you can do is use the present moment to take the next step.
Yes. Is that episode out? I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. That one is I think it's number 10.
I'll have to go check that one out because I didn't listen to that one yet. So
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. My name on Instagram used to be Addicted to Being Late. So like that you shared that, I'm like, yes, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. That's really cool. Thank you. All right. Well, let's take another quick break and we will be back with more from Rich Life.
Yeah. And then after the break, I think let's jump back and we'll talk about your actual business and what you're doing.
Beautiful.
Because a lot of our community, they're aspiring coaches. A lot of them are young, like newer entrepreneurs as well. And so we love getting feedback about what's going well in your business and some of the struggles that come up through it too. And so that's something we would absolutely love to hear and I think would definitely benefit our community.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. We'll take a quick break and be right back. Thank you for listening. This has been part 1 of our 2-part series on this topic.
The second episode will be out next week, if it's not out already.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider liking, subscribing, and/or reviewing us on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Also, if there's someone you know who clearly doesn't know what the fuck they're doing and would benefit from this topic, please hit that share button and send them this episode.
Let's normalize the feeling of uncertainty.
Asking for help and admitting that we don't know
what the fuck we're doing either.